The pre-dawn chill still clung to the air on the tarmac at Phuket Air Base. Mac, barely 19 but already carrying the haunted eyes of a man twice his age, ran his gloved hand over the cool, familiar steel of his M60. Beside him, Sergeant Barnes, the crew chief and the Huey's other gunner, slapped Mac's shoulder. Barnes, a grizzled veteran with a perpetual cigar stub clamped between his teeth, simply nodded. No need for words. They knew the drill. This was their third mission. This week, a standard insertion of a platoon of infantry into a suspected Viet Cong stronghold deep in the Bong Sun Valley. Standard, yet every flight was a gamble. Captain Hayes, the pilot, ran through his pre-flight checks, his face a mask of practiced calm. Lieutenant Miller, the co-pilot, younger than Hayes but equally focused, mirrored his actions. The Huey, designated Phoenix 1, vibrated to life, its turbine engine whining a rising crescendo before settling into a powerful roar. Mac climbed into his canvas sling seat, the familiar buckle of his monkey strap clicking securely into the hardpoint on the fuselage. This simple harness, a heavy-duty nylon belt clipped to the aircraft, was his only tether to life. He tested. Its tension, a ritual performed before every flight, a silent acknowledgement of the void waiting beneath him. As Phoenix 1 lifted off, the world tilted, then resolved itself into a dizzying aerial panorama. Below, the base receded, replaced by the endless undulating green of rice paddies, winding rivers, and dense, unforgiving jungle. Mac settled into his routine, his eyes scanning the landscape, his finger resting lightly on the M60's trigger. The wind, a constant, forceful presence, whipped at his helmet and uniform, making the M60 feel both an extension of his body and a heavy anchor. He thought about the men in the back, the grunts huddled together, their faces a mixture of apprehension and grim resolve. His job was to get them there, and if hell broke loose, to get them out. The thought was a cold, hard knot in his gut, but it sharpened his focus. Hours bled into one another, marked only by the shifting light and the subtle changes in the landscape below. The rice paddies gave way to more rugged, untamed jungle, trees growing taller, denser, their canopies forming an impenetrable green carpet. Captain Hayes's voice crackled in their headsets. "All right, Phoenix 1, approaching the LZ. Recon reports moderate tree cover, possible small arms. Stay sharp." Mac's grip tightened on the M60. This was it. The air in the cabin seemed to thicken, charged with unspoken anticipation. He leaned out slightly, pushing against the harness, trying to get a better view of the landing zone. It looked like a natural clearing, an ugly scar carved into the jungle, surrounded by towering trees that offered perfect concealment for an enemy. Barnes, on the other side, was already repositioning, his M60 traversing slowly, scanning for any hint of movement. "Pop smoke! Grunts!" Hayes ordered. Below, a plume of purple smoke erupted from the center of the LZ, marking their target. The helicopter began its descent, the roar of the rotors changing pitch, the nose dipping as they bled off speed. The wind in Mac's face intensified, threatening to tear his helmet off. The ground rushed up to meet them, the individual leaves, and branches of the trees becoming distinct, then blurring as they dropped lower. Mac's heart hammered against his ribs. He could feel the eyes of unseen enemy soldiers watching them, waiting. "Watch that tree line, Mac!" Barnes yelled over the intercom, his voice cutting through the rotor wash. "They love to hit us on the way in." Just as he spoke, a flash of movement in the dense foliage caught Mac's eye. A faint, almost imperceptible gleam of light, then a puff of smoke. Not smoke, he realized with a jolt of ice in his veins, a muzzle flash. "Contact! Left flank! Automatic! Fire!" Mac screamed, even as his thumb instinctively depressed the butterfly trigger on the M60. The machine gun roared to life, a vibrating demon in his hands, spitting a furious stream of tracer rounds into the jungle. The smell of cordite, sharp and acrid, filled his nostrils. The moment Mac's M60 opened fire, chaos erupted. The landing zone became a crucible of sound and fury. The air around Phoenix 1 instantly filled with the snap and crack of incoming rounds, the distinct chilling sound of bullets tearing through the thin aluminum skin of the helicopter. Hayes reacted instantly, jamming the cyclic stick, throwing the Huey into a violent evasive maneuver. The helicopter lurched sharply to the right, a maneuver that tested every ounce of Mac's training and the integrity of his harness. He was slammed against the side of the fuselage, his body fighting the G-forces, but his hand never left the M60. He squeezed the trigger again, sending another long burst into the muzzle flashes that now seemed to blossom everywhere in the tree line. Below, the infantrymen were spilling out of the Huey's cargo bay, crouching low, trying to find cover, their own M16s joining the cacophony. Barnes's M60 on the other side was also spitting fire, laying down a devastating field of suppression. The sheer volume of incoming fire was overwhelming. A round ricocheted off the helicopter's floor near Mac's feet, sending a shower of sparks. He felt a sharp sting on his cheek as a piece of shrapnel grazed him, but the adrenaline numbed the pain. RPG, right side! Miller's voice screamed over the intercom, raw with urgency. Mac saw it, a smoke trail arcing through the air, heading directly for their side. His stomach dropped. Hayes, with incredible skill, jammed the collective, pulling the helicopter into a steep climb, the rotor blades biting furiously at the air. The Huey rocketed upwards, the RPG whistling harmlessly below their tail rotor by mere feet. The near miss was a gut punch, a stark reminder of how close death always was. Mac pushed against his harness again, leaning out, his M60 still chattering, desperate to silence the threat below. He could feel the sweat stinging his eyes, the vibrations of the machine gun running up his arms, the intense heat radiating from the barrel. They were taking hits, the sound of tearing metal alarmingly frequent. He could hear Hayes and Miller making rapid calculations, planning their next move. This wasn't just a drop-off. It was a desperate fight for survival, and the way, Dr. Gunners were the first and last line of defense. Phoenix 1 clawed its way out of the hot LZ, battered but still flying. The descent had turned into a desperate withdrawal, leaving behind the immediate suffocating danger of the ambush. As they gained altitude, the incoming fire lessened, becoming sporadic pops in the distance. The helicopter was a mess. Bullet. Holes peppered the fuselage. One of the instrument panels in the cockpit was shattered, and the canvas seats were ripped. More importantly, 2 of the infantrymen they had just dropped off had been hit before they could even find cover. They were lying motionless on the jungle floor. Mac's chest heaved, his breathing ragged. The adrenaline was slowly beginning to recede, leaving him shaky and hollow. He scanned the ground below, eyes searching for any sign of movement, any lingering threat. Barnes, across from him, had slumped back in his seat, his M60 silent, steam rising from its smoking barrel. "Damn," Barnes muttered, his voice hoarse. "That was a close one." Hayes's voice came over the intercom, tired but firm. "All right, Phoenix 1, we're taking them out. Get ready for an orbit. We need to suppress that LZ." The decision was made. They wouldn't simply retreat, they would circle back, their gunners providing covering fire for the pinned-down grunts. This meant flying back into the teeth of the ambush they had just escaped. Mac took a deep breath, trying to calm the tremor in his hands. He knew what this meant. More incoming fire, more near misses, more chances for the Huey and himself to be torn apart. As they began their wide, sweeping orbit, Mac caught a glimpse of something on the ground near the edge of the LZ. A lone figure, an infantryman, was trying to crawl towards the cover of a fallen tree, clearly wounded. He wasn't one of the 2 motionless bodies. He had been left behind. A cold wave of guilt washed over Mac. They had flown out, leaving a comrade in a desperate situation. The helicopter became not just a machine, but a tool for salvation, or a monument to a failure. His focus sharpened again, more intensely than before. The M60 felt heavy and powerful. His responsibility, absolute. The question of falling out of the helicopter was absurd now. The only thing that mattered was staying in the air and putting rounds on target to save that man. Captain Hayes piloted Phoenix 1 with a grim determination, banking the Huey into a tighter orbit around the hot LZ. The helicopter became a whirlwind of steel and lead, its rotors beating the air into submission as it provided a deadly umbrella of fire for the stranded infantry. Mack and Barnes, now fully committed, poured relentless fire into the tree line. Their M60s chattered almost continuously, the air filled with the smell of spent gunpowder and the sight of glowing red tracer rounds arcing into the jungle like angry hornets. Mack focused on a section of foliage where he'd seen repeated muzzle flashes. He aimed slightly ahead of where he thought the enemy was, walking his rounds through the trees. He felt the impact of incoming bullets hitting the fuselage again, dull thuds and sharp pings. One round tore through the thin plexiglass of the cockpit, sending shards flying. But Hayes and Miller were thankfully untouched, their concentration unbroken. The wounded grunt on the ground was now trying to wave, a desperate, almost imperceptible movement.